and ugly.
I agree, Andy.
Well, howdy, folks. My name is Rory, and you are at the Coin.org. And I'd like to welcome everyone to the Internet Rodeo, just a bunch of bull riders. And joining us today is Turd Ferguson from TF Metals Report, the Doc from Silver Doctors, Andy Hoffman, Media Director at MilesFranklin.com, and Claudio Grass, Managing Director at globalgold.ch out of Switzerland. And Claudio also works with Taki over at goldsilverworlds.com, and I'd like to thank Taki for posting the video at Gold Silver Worlds and asking his readers for questions on behalf of Claudio. And thank you very much, Taki, for all your support. It is very much appreciated. And with that, I would like to welcome you all, gentlemen.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And let's just jump right in. I was reading this morning, I don't know if any of you guys have seen this or not, that was posted over at MindWeb, and Lawrence Williams wrote this piece, and the title of it is Silver in Supply Deficit, but Price Unmoved So Far. And he provides a great chart where he breaks down the mine production versus including recycling, and he gives a total supply year over year, 2013 to 2014, at positive 2%. And then he gives the demand, and he breaks it down by industrial, jewelry, photography, physical investment, de-hedging, and total demand of negative 1%. Once again, 2013 to 2014, year over year. And then the market balance, negative 62%. So there's 62% more demand than there is supply, but the nominal silver price is negative 16% year over year. And Turd, I want to start with you because I know that you, at the beginning of each year or at the end of the year, you kind of give a little forecast as to what you see based on what's been happening. And what do you make of these numbers and what's actually happening right now?
Well, I should touch on that forecast first.
Okay.
After as brutally as things were beaten down in 2012 and 13, I presumed that the bull markets, which I still believe are in place, at least fundamentally are in place for both gold and silver, would represent themselves in 2014. I thought a logical bounce back would be something like 25%. And that gave me a gold target around 1,500 and a silver target of 26. Thought that made all the sense in the world. And then sand is quickly passing through the hourglass on those. So that may be our targets for next year. We'll see. In terms of Mr. Williams's data, I'd like to take a look at that. I'm sure it's valid. I'm sure he's all over it. The distortion is just the way that we continue to price precious metal. It's a scam, it's a joke, it's whatever term you want to use, in that if you look at the CFTC data, and of course we have no idea how corrupted the data might be, but if you look at the data, there's maybe 30 or 35 hedge funds taking one side of the trades and maybe 2 or 3 big banks on the other side. And so the global recognized price, the quoted price, the fixed price, all of that is based off the whims of 30 or 35 trading algorithms and the banks that are making the market on the other side. I mean, it has nothing to do with fundamentals. It has nothing to do with supply and demand. It will eventually, I mean, they're not our friend Andy, who's on the call, likes to say economic mother nature. I mean, economic mother nature will reassert herself at some point. They're not the suggestions of supply and demand. They're the laws of economics and supply and demand. But for now, price is moved at the whims of these paper traders that are just simply chasing dots on a screen and momentum. It has no connection to reality. And all we can do at this point is wait for reality to reassert itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fact that the world had record silver demand last year. Whether you're talking about India, the U.S. Mint, the Royal Canadian Mint. Of course, we don't know what's going on in China. We just know that they won't ever let an ounce out of the country. And since China had record gold demand last year, it stands to reason they had record silver demand as well. And this year, we're seeing a higher number for the U.S. Mint and the Royal Canadian Mint, and the Indian demand, even with all of their tariffs, is about the same as last year. So again, as Turd said, there is not the slightest bit of rationale that makes sense other than the manipulation. Now, when it comes to supply, look, I wrote an article 2 days ago, said $50 million of silver. That's it. I mean, this is what the biggest physical delivery exchange in the world, Shanghai, claims to have $50 million worth of silver. And it's down over 90% since last year's attack started last April. So, and as for the outlook for supply, well, I mean, if the year ended today and the mining companies were forced to do their year-end reserve accounting with $17 silver, they'll probably write down 30% of their assets, just like they did last year. I think the mining industry is dead and buried for years to come, and that production will fall so precipitously it will shock even Goldcorp CEO and with his peak gold comments.
I fully agree with you guys. But at the end of the day, when we look at the physical gold or silver market, I mean, how many people in the Western world are invested in physical? It's most likely less than 0.5%. So when the paper market is much higher, and as long that's the case, basically they can play around with the prices and so on. And I think the fundamentals, as I think Turd said, are absolutely in place. And, I mean, if the people will understand that it's not possible to print wealth out of the printing press, out of nothing, and instead, think about a bit more about monetary history, what has been gold for, 3,000-4,000 years, and which has been the basement also for the US dollars to become the world currency reserve, then we are back to gold, physical. And I think, I mean, our people, the guys who understand that there is their insurance against the uncertainties in an ocean of paper, they will be happy with that insurance, and it will pay out in the future.
And that's the beauty of it. I just wanted to add, we're talking about the lack of ownership in the United States, and Canada. Of course, we did have big buying in 2011 and 2008. But I can't emphasize enough, when you talk about the Royal Canadian Mint and the U.S. Mint had record sales of Silver Eagles in 2011 and are on pace to at least meet those and probably exceed those in 2014, shows you how much pent-up demand there is. Because I can tell you, working at one of the largest bullion dealers, it's not Americans who have been buying up all the silver in Canada and the United States. It's foreigners, and you can bet it's led by the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians. So when the Westerners do get around to figuring out that their currencies are collapsing and their nations are collapsing, they will come back like they were buying in 2008 and 2011 and then some.
What we're seeing with on pace for record demand in North America, both in the U.S. Mint and the Canadian Mint, is the sentiment in silver is probably the worst it's been in the entire bull market. It's pretty amazing that you're seeing record levels of investment demand with really bottom of a bear market type sentiment in the sector. So when this does turn and you start to have momentum to the upside and people jumping on, it's almost hard to imagine what type of investment demand you might see in silver.
Yeah, sentiment is down to levels from 2002, if anyone could believe that, given that we're in the highest level of money printing ever, the worst level of geopolitical tensions and economic activity of our lifetimes.
What are you seeing, Doc, over at SD Bullion as far as demand? Has it exploded as well, like Andy was saying that it has over at Miles Franklin?
No, it hasn't at Miles Franklin.
Oh, it has not?
I'm saying the demand at the mints, the U.S. Mint and the Canadian Mint has been at record highs last year and this year. But it's not people buying from Miles Franklin. It's foreigners who are buying from the Mint, because it's not Americans, as the doc was saying. The sentiment in the West has never been worse. I mean, you look at these last 2 days, you would have thought there'd be an explosion of American buying. No, they're just still sitting there like a deer in headlights, waiting for the big one to happen. And of course, I think it's happening right now.
So we are seeing a big increase in U.S. and Canadian sales, particularly U.S., but it is almost all silver over gold. Gold picked up a bit when gold dropped under 1,200 for a couple of days, but really over the last 2.5 weeks, ever since silver dipped under 18, and obviously it intensified when silver dipped under 17, what we've seen at SD Bullion, we've seen order volume and dollar volume for silver has increased probably 5 to 8 fold from what we saw over the summer when we were really in the doldrums and wasn't much market activity to the upside or the downside. So
yeah, and I would say that September and August were our two best months, but you can't compare September and August to what we were doing in 2011 or even at some points in 2012 and certainly early 2013. So yes, we have definitely picked up off the lows, but when you think about where we were at times in years past, it's not even close.
And you guys are touching upon the key driver of paper price and the manipulation scheme in 2014 has been to control sentiment. Because in the West, we only see value in things that are going up in price, unlike the East, that they want to buy more at lower prices. In the West, it's only when things start going up that people start buying. And controlling that sentiment through price has been critical all year. We've been tracking a long-term trend line in the gold market that goes back to the initial recovery highs of May 2013 after the big beatdown in April. That line has been enforced dramatically all through the year by the cartel banks. We got above that line for about a week or two in March. We're immediately shoved down $110. We got above that line in June. And just as we really tried to pull away in the middle of July, we were shoved back down, and now we're down $160 from that high. It is keeping price down so that sentiment stays down because supply is so stretched thin, particularly in gold. The London vaults are empty. There are very few London gold bars left that can be shipped off to China and then recast into, or shipped off to Switzerland, recast into kilobars to go to China. If Western demand returns, if Andy and the doc all of a sudden are talking about how the stuff is flying off the shelves, then the banks really will have a serious problem, and it's that day that we're waiting for.
Right, and of course, we're not just talking about gold and silver here. We are talking about the relentless 24/7 manipulation of every market imaginable. I mean, all you have to do is watch this morning. Watch this morning. I did a piece called The New Hail Mary Trade a few months ago, saying that now the Fed, forget what they say about tapering or not tapering or QEing, the Fed is so desperate to prevent interest rates from plunging and thus showing the whole world that QE is failing and that the economy is plunging, that they are just constantly coming in with what I call the new Hail Mary trade of trying desperately to push interest rates up, but it just doesn't work. It's failing. They just keep trying and trying, just like they keep with the PPT. Every time it's down, they run the market up. I've seen it about 5 times already today, but they're failing. They are losing control now of the paper markets that everyone thought they had control of. And if they're going to lose control of the paper markets, just think how hard it will be for them to control these tiny physical markets in gold and silver, which have almost no supply, which are trading below the cost of production, and have the most bullish fundamentals from an economic standpoint, from a valuation standpoint, in our lifetimes, perhaps going back centuries.
Well, let me jump in here, gentlemen. And Claudio, I want to stay with this kind of along the same lines of the same theme that we're where we're at, but shifting gears just slightly. And how bad, this is one of the readers' questions, and how bad must it get before the citizens in the United States realize that gold and silver are real money and that the paper banknotes are fake money? I know that Switzerland has a referendum coming up, or a vote that's coming up, to repatriate all of their gold and to back the franc by, I believe, 20%. What's going on with the referendum?
Okay. Well, how bad must it get? Must it get that the people will see that gold is real money? I think, we have been educated in a government forced schooling system. I mean, most of the people, they have no clue about monetary history and all that stuff. So, I mean, they just believe in Keynes and the centralized government planning. And so, they have been brainwashed. And then, of course, you have the mass medias, which basically are, publishing only, articles which are in their interest. So, I mean, a lot of people, if they don't search for the truth or try to dig, under the surface to find out how an economy is working, what has been money, what are the characteristics of money, I think it will be hard, but most of the people in the future, will realize when they that gold is money, because at the end of the day, it's the basement. That's still why the central banks are holding gold, and but I think it's a process. Everyone, you cannot force people into gold. They really have to understand it, and they have to do their own research and to de-brainwash themselves, from the actual system. The initiative we have over here in Switzerland, first of all, the aim is, that we are not allowed to sell, the SNB is not allowed to sell any gold in the future anymore. The second is that we repatriate all the gold. We have 30% which are still stored outside of of Switzerland, in Canada and in England, and that gold should represent at least 20% of the SNB assets. And at the moment, I think we are down to 7%. When you look at, government, central banks, mass medias, politicians, everyone is against the gold initiative, because they understand that it's weakening the actual system. They're afraid that that they will lose, of course, power. So there is no real public discussion taking place, except, in social medias. And of course, all the eyes of gold-loving people and liberty-loving people are from abroad are looking at Switzerland. But within Switzerland, there is no huge campaign promoting the gold initiative.
And I really think that's sad, Claudio. As an American, I look at Switzerland and their historical independence and their neutrality and everything that goes with it. And they sacrificed all of it on the altar of the European Union back in 2011, when they finally just completely punted what was left of their gold backing to their currency, and they pegged it to the euro. And now they're joined at the hip. And if people of Switzerland knew what they had done to their heritage, to their tradition, and what they have inflicted upon their posterity, then they would wake up and they would vote yes on the initiative. Yeah, we'd like to. As a gold person, a promoter of gold, for everything that goes with it. Yes, I'd love to see them vote for the initiative. But geez, just for the history of the good people of Switzerland, I just wish they would wake up and like you said, learn their history, learn their economics, and understand what this means to them. They have no independence to go back to as long as they are pegged to the euro. But yet, I fear, like what you were saying, it's all going to get kind of swept under the rug, and all the big mass media and all of the economic institutions and everything else in Switzerland are going to tell everybody to vote no, and that's probably what will end up happening.
Well, this to me is the most amazing, if you're a psychology student writing a thesis about what's wrong with human nature, why people just keep making the same mistakes over and over again. Because when you talk about betting on the wrong horse, okay, forget the political motives. We're talking about, this was 3 years ago. The Swiss decided to go away from their independence and their gold and all that stuff and bet on the European Union. The European Union is not only worse off than it was 3 years ago, it's dramatically worse off. It's so much worse off than it was 3 years ago. It's almost amazing to believe that only 3 years have passed. And we're talking about Switzerland, who has the most, literally, there's not a group of people on the planet who have more knowledge of monetary history, who have more knowledge of banking and all these things. And to think they're not even discussing it when everything is crumbling around them, and they actually have the ability to save themselves. And I know people think that, they will never be able to do it. Sure they will. There's still a lot of dumb people out there. There's no way that the Swiss cannot save themselves if they vote yes. But, I think my personal view is, like Claudio says, not a chance it passes unless the world starts to fall apart before then. And we still got 2 months' time.
Let me say something, the Swiss people, we are talking about, we are the last remaining direct democracy on this planet. Mm-hmm. We have federalistic structures in place. So, that means that, the cantons, which you call it states, municipalities, that they had a lot of power to decide themselves in terms of taxation, schooling system, and so on. So, the Swiss people, they never had a king. They never accepted, they never had a centralized point of view, and they were not looking for rulers that is telling them what they have to do. So, I mean, this is still something which is, in the genes of the Swiss people. And what they also understood is that we are losing, the Swiss people were not pro the European Union. The Swiss people are against the European Union because they just decided that's why they want to do the immigration policy on their own. They don't want to delegate it to Brussels, that we had a vote in February basically about that. So, the Swiss people really, the majority, they want to stay independent. And I think I don't know the outcome, how it will be. What I wanted to say is, that the establishment in Switzerland, of course, they all believe, they're all bureaucrats, and they believe in, centralized government, and, these people gained also over the last few years, but especially since we sold, half of our gold reserves since 2000. But it doesn't mean that, that Switzerland is not good for a surprise. And when I talk to people in Switzerland on the streets, a lot of people, they realize something is really going wrong. They really realize, hey, okay, the stock market is booming. I purchased a house. I get, an interest rates for a mortgage at 0.9, 1.2%, ridiculously low. And they also understand that, they also see that our balance sheet of the Swiss National Bank has increased 5 times since 2008. So, they don't feel that comfortable. And I think a lot of people also realize that we need an independent currency, and that the euro basically took over in a way. And so I'm not that negative. I think whatever happens, whatever the outcome will be of this initiative, if the people will say yes or no, it will help to bring out the right questions, to question the actual system, to question the actual monetary system, and they will follow in the future what's going to happen. And I believe, when we stay on the same track, of course, over the next few years, the middle class is just going to be impoverished, and people will see that, and that will help, to spread the right ideas. And I think that's why I'm, even over the long run, over the coming years, I believe, Swiss people might go back in their, beliefs, which basically made our culture and also our country.
Well, I'll take it one step further, Claudio. I've been writing about this. I've written about it several times here in 2014. The first one was back in May, and I called it an open letter to the good people of Switzerland. And in that, I contend, and I still stand by this, I don't think you have any gold left. That's the thing that I would really watch, as just how ramped up the hysteria and the pressure gets from the no side of the equation as we approach the end of November, because I don't think the emperor has any clothes. I think the rest of the Swiss gold reserves were leased out and sold beginning in 2011 to push price back down from 1920. And we wonder where all this gold, China imported 2,200 tons last year. Of that 2,200, 1,500 tons came from outside of China. 700 came from their recycling. 300 came from recycling, and 400 came from their own mine supply. But 1,500 tons came from outside of China. Well, where the hell is it coming from?
And of course, Turd, as you wrote in that article, it was a great article, and I've also spoken of many times. We all know what I call Operation PM Annihilation 1, which was on September 6th. 2011, It was on Labor Day night when gold had actually hit $1,920 an ounce during Labor Day. The Swiss announced that they are going to peg the currency to the euro and devalue the most sacred currency in the world. And then within an hour's time, gold is taken down by $200.
It was actually, and if I remember right, Andy, it was like 5 minutes before that hit the wires.
Exactly, 5 minutes.
Initially got rated.
Exactly. Yeah. 5 minutes before the announcement, gold instantly dropped $50.
Exactly. And that left gold as the only money left. There was some legitimacy to the Swiss franc up until that moment. And so gold had to be smashed, and to drive price back from 1920 to get all the way down to where it is today. The rest of the Swiss gold has been leased out and sold. So what'll be interesting to find out is if this initiative actually passes, it's going to take a lot of gold to get back to 20%. And we'll see where we go from here.
Well, what can be said is, we used to have 2,600 tons by the end of the 90s, and we were up until the end of the 90s. We were still, on the gold standard. Basically, we had to back it up by 40%.
Yep.
And I just read an article from, Hildebrand, our former president of the SMB, and he basically came up with saying, that within the Washington Agreement that, most of this 1,600 tons which we have sold were sold, from that gold was stored in the United States, and that gold has been, that's gone, of course.
Yes.
So in the 1,050 tons we still have, of course we can always question and we can speculate. I really don't know, if the gold is still in Switzerland or not. I personally believe, our government is, I don't like central bankers, but and even the Swiss politicians, they are not all jerks and they are not criminals, and some people are just, some people just believe that they know better, what 100,000 or 200 or 2 million people have to do and what they are allowed to eat, and they're just a bit, strange people when it comes to that, but they are not extremely criminal. So that's why I would be really surprised, if let's say at least, the gold which should be stored in Switzerland, and that means 70%, so at least 700 tons, if they wouldn't be around. But as I said, we don't know. Of course.
They say 700 tons are held in Switzerland. I understand that the Biz headquarters in Basel are basically their own little city-state in a way, but Basel is in Switzerland.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
I would like to see a single central bank or even a single regular bank allow an audit. Why would anyone believe what the Swiss have to say about how much gold they have? Why would anyone believe? Heck, the COMEX says you can't even trust our data. They're all lying, and you do simple math. This goes back to Frank Veneroso's work 15 years ago, Eric Sprott's work. Simple math. The gold is gone. There is no way that the demand that we've seen could have been supplied by anything other than central bank inventories, and that the gap between demand and the declining supply has only been widening over the years. It will be found out. And the thing is, the Swiss have the one chance. They're the only one of these Western nations that has a chance to save face and get themselves back into a safe place. And so, what's going to happen on November 30th? It's incalculable the difference in the lives of the Swiss people if they vote no versus yes.
Andy, they pegged themselves. They punted it all away 3 years ago, and that has just worked out so well for them. You would sure think somebody would sit back now 3 years on and go, this isn't working so well. I think we ought to go back to the way we used to do it.
Yeah, when the Swiss had a referendum to raise the minimum wage, Claudio, what was it, to $20 an hour? Obviously, they're seeing the inflation that you get from pegging your currency to the biggest money printer around.
Yeah, sure, but listen, the Swiss people, we had these minimum salaries, now we had, an election, a voting basically for one healthcare insurance company, only one, and it was all refused by the Swiss people. So don't underestimate, the Swiss people. They also, they were not, minimum salaries were not allowed, were not approved. People said, no, hey, we don't take this because it's fishy, and we still understand that it's not working. So, I would not underestimate the Swiss people. Absolutely not. We are really the last, we have some liberty-loving people in this 8 million small country. And some of them, have a long-term and deep culture, and it's still in our genes. So, the Swiss they take a lot of stuff, but, one day the suffer will be, also here in Switzerland, at the moment the people are not suffering because everything is working fine. And the economy is still working, and of course, with the pact to the euro, they basically assured that we had an internal redistribution, basically supporting the export industry and all these guys, which are also most of them linked to politics and to the lobbyist groups and so on. But the Swiss are realizing it's not heading in the right direction. It's not playing in their interest, and so I'm still positive when it comes to Switzerland.
Rory, quickly answering that second half of your question from the reader about when will Americans wake up and understand the value of gold and silver. Personally, I don't see that happening to the American public until the day after our currency collapses.
That's probably right, Doc.
They'll get a quick education when their EBT cards and their debit cards and their Bank of America cards don't scan through at Kroger's and all the grocery stores, and all the fiat currency and electronic currency has declined. So they'll learn fast, but I don't see it happening before then to the average American public. And what we kind of lose touch on a little bit here in the precious metals community, we read Turd's articles, we read Eric Sprott's articles, we read all the experts and everybody. We read Zero Hedge every day, and it's almost like you get into your own little world and you start to believe that everybody has an understanding of that. But if you go out in the street, just watch one of Mark Dice's videos in California. If you go out in the street and ask an average American, they don't even know what silver is unless it's in a ring or jewelry. They don't know what gold and silver is. They don't know the value. They don't know that it's worth anything.
Or ask someone that you think is smart, that really knows their finance, economics, accounting, all that stuff. Ask them how money's created in the U.S. That's always good for everybody.
I'll take it even a step further than that. I went into a bank and asked them where their money came from. And they said the Treasury. And I said, no, it comes from the Federal Reserve. And the bank branch manager came out with her economics degree and wanted to argue with me that it came from the Treasury.
Well, I wrote my first missive to the public in around, 2004 or 5, and it's been 10 years, and my goal back then and my goal still now is to get 1 or 2% of the people to figure it out with, the spread of the internet. I'm just hoping that a tiny bit of people could figure it out before it's over. And of course, there's only enough physical metal out there for a tiny amount of people, but I agree completely with everyone here. There's not a chance in hell that the vast majority will do anything until the end game. And of course, most people don't have the money. The biggest reason people follow what they're told is because most people don't have retirement savings. They don't have regular savings. They just need their entitlements and whatever they can get to survive.
Yep.
And as Pastor Lindsey Williams said, love him or hate him, he did say this, and I believe it, that they will make us so broke that we are unable to fight back. And he said that it's been 4 or 5 years ago, and I believe that that's where we're headed. But with this conversation, that is a great segue into, and Doc, I want to start with you. And this is another reader's question. And he's asking, do you expect China to use its gold reserves to create a gold-backed currency? And if they do, will that create world war?
I think the signs are obvious that they're headed that way. I don't necessarily think it'll happen quite as fast as a lot of people in the precious metals world are anticipating, but it's pretty clear that they're working to move away from the dollar. And obviously, it's not just China; it's Russia, it's all the BRICS, and not even just the BRICS now. It's really across the world. Countries are slowly moving away from the dollar. I think just the other day I saw South Korea. I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say they had increased their yuan reserves by something like 50 or 55-fold over the last year. So you can see that it's not just the BRICS, it's even parts of the Western world. But yes, it likely very easily could trigger war. We've seen the U.S. go to war with Libya, Iraq. They've tried to go to war with Iran for years, all over the petrodollar and the dollar reserve currency standard. Now, obviously, China and Russia are much more formidable enemies than Iraq or Libya is, but big business, so it would not surprise me.
Well, the way that I look at, I think there's a lot of people, especially in this community, who are hoping, guys like Jim Willey write about what's going on behind the scenes, and they're hoping the Chinese will come out and say, yes, we have all this gold and we're instituting a currency. And I think the chances of something like that happening are next to nothing. Look, the Chinese are preparing in every way, shape, and form to be the next world superpower. They have the money, they have the gold behind the scenes, they have the manufacturing capacity. They're making the alliances with everyone imaginable, from the Russians to the Africans. And yes, in time they will be in charge. But let's face it, when you talk about announcements, let's say they announced we have 10,000 tons of gold and we want to back the currency. You're talking about a global economic collapse of epic proportions with an announcement like that. And yes, of course, the Chinese yuan would be strong and the Chinese ultimately would win. But the Chinese economy right now, which is already collapsing, would collapse even further. The current government wouldn't survive this. So this is not something that anyone wants to happen. I think the markets are ultimately going to force when it happens, and I think the Chinese will be better prepared for it than anyone else. But believe me, there's no governments that want to change the status quo right now, because the status quo is already pretty bad.
And I would echo what Andy said. I just yesterday on my site, I had an interview with Koos Jansen, who most of us know. Koos is he's just a regular dude from Amsterdam who has made himself through a lot of hard work and study into one of the most renowned experts of Chinese supply and demand for gold on the planet. And Koos is under the impression that we will finally get an update from China and how much they've accumulated. We won't get a full update. They won't tell us all that they have, but they'll admit that they have enough to give the yuan the legitimacy that it would need to be included in this the global SDR, and that's going to be coming up in 2015. So no one should be holding their breath that by Thanksgiving the Chinese are going to announce 20,000 tons in a backing of the yuan. Like Andy said, it's not going to happen that quickly, and it's not going to happen overnight. But there is a gradual shift going on away from the dollar, and the world recognizes that. The Chinese recognize that, as the doc said. The Russians recognize that. All of the dollar creditor nations recognize that. And we, as gold bugs, if you will, recognize that too. And so we all have to take the same preparations and just kind of plan for the long term, which is what the physical acquisition of gold and silver does.
And of course, care of all the horrible things going on in the world, that long term may very well be a lot shorter than people think. So
that's true.
While I say that the whole transition to the new order, whatever it may be, may take a very long time, the transition from a cartel suppressing price to a cartel losing control can be very, very quick. And again, all you have to do is look at what's going on in the paper, stock, and bond markets around the world to realize that they are not omniscient. Believe me, the powers that be are not thrilled with worldwide interest rates plummeting to record lows, because it symbolizes that the world knows QE to infinity is coming, and they know that a depression is here and is going to get worse.
And I would go along with that too, Andy. I think a lot of the powers that be, if you will, that see this stuff coming would prefer, and they're maybe planning for, some type of orderly transition that takes place over years or a decade or something like that. But the world doesn't always behave in an orderly way, and that's, I think, probably the more likely outcome, as you said.
I mean, geez, we had a massive bubble crash in 2000 and an equally massive or bigger one in 2008. And here we are only 6 years later getting ready for the third one. Obviously, these guys who are running the central banks and the nations have no idea what they're doing. They're just making things worse, and they're making the time intervals between the crashes tighter.
I also see, there is a geopolitical power shift, and at the same time, we will see this huge wealth transfer from west to east. And we have seen these geopolitical power shifts, like British King, the Empire, when against the German Kaiserreich. We have seen these power shifts and what can happen. And I also think the Chinese, they are just, all these BRICS are going to purchase in the future more physical gold. Central Asia is doing it. Some of the hyperinflation area countries, we had 50 hyperinflation in the last century. So basically, gold will be king. And in the meantime, we are just printing paper out of nothing, spiking up some asset bubbles, and that's it. And at the same time, we will see, a massive centralization within the system. That we have leading, killing smaller businesses, and leading, towards, the too big to fails. and they will be bailed out and supported until, the bubble will burst, because that's the only outcome. I mean, you cannot, otherwise it's impossible. We have accumulated such a gigantic debt in the Western world, and now we not even have, the industry left to produce something. We are just consuming. And so I think this is not the basis for a sound economy, and everything will end one fine day.
And don't forget that these bubbles that we're talking about here are increasingly for just a handful of people. When we talk about the 1%, the whole world participated in the 2000 bubble. Only a small portion did in the 2007 and 8 bubble. And this one, I almost have trouble calling it a bubble, because the only people benefiting from it are the banks that destroyed the world in the first place, getting free money from the government and benefiting from the government's PPP operations. I mean, we're talking about such an incredible wealth disparity in the world right now that it's to believe that the few people are going to be able to hold down the masses is incomprehensible.
Yep. I mean, if you had assets in 2008, if you were lucky enough to have a 6-digit 401k in 2008, hey, great. You're back to where you started. Maybe you're up some versus 5 years ago. But the average, at least even here in the U.S., the median income is down 15% since 2009, while the cost of living is up probably 25%. I mean, the less than 1% are the ones who have at least gotten something out of this latest round of money printing. They and the big banks. Other than that, everybody else is really suffering.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you have 23% unemployment rate if it's based on the 1980 calculation method of the government, and 50 million Americans on food stamps. And at the same time, we have a velocity of money, or better said, credit in the system, which is on record low. I mean, I think it stands at after Second World War levels. Yep. So we can see real economy is going nowhere. There is no bright future. And what they are doing is basically just printing money and give it to their friends, which are the closest to the central banks and to the government. And in the meantime, as I said, somebody has to pay for it, and that's the middle class.
Yeah, and it's been exported, and they've exported inflation the world around. Especially Americans are so secular. I mean, we've had terrible inflation here, but we don't realize how bad it's been the rest of the world. Starting with the Arab Spring 3 or 4 years ago, because those are the countries that the people spend the highest majority of their income on food. But now it's the world around. Since 2011. Since the Operation Twist, QE3, QE4, whatever you call them, since Abenomics, the OMT, the LTRO, all that stuff, since then, the average currency worldwide has fallen more than 20% against the dollar. And the average currency in the Fragile Five, where a quarter of the world's population lives, has fallen 40% against the dollar. That's massive, massive inflation that's been exported around the world. So again, not only are the average people not participating in the bubbles of all the money printing, but they're being destroyed by inflation.
Let's leave the folks with a more positive outlook, if we can.
All right, for gold, okay. So that's a positive.
And Andy, I want to. What's that?
Insurance is on sale.
Insurance is on sale. There you have it. And this is another reader's question. Is from Idaho Fireman, and want to start with Andy. Idaho Fireman is asking, what is the panel's exit strategy for the big fail? Says, I am a stacker and have been fully awake for 4 years now, but I don't know what the end game for my stack really is. Can the panel describe what they think that looks like for them and the average stacker?
Well, I don't think of it in terms of an exit strategy. My goal is to survive what is coming. I know the currencies are all going to continue to collapse until they ultimately all collapse. And in the meantime, what I used to consider savings, I used to consider money, dollars in the bank savings, I now consider my gold and silver to be my savings. I hold it for the long term without a plan for it. I hope that the worst case scenario doesn't happen of wars and draconian governments and hyperinflation. But it may, and if it doesn't, that's great. But there's no way that I'm going to consider anything else to be savings other than gold and silver until I see a new monetary system that is based on something real, which is probably gold and silver. And it may not happen in my lifetime. And if it doesn't, great. I hold on to my gold and silver for my lifetime, and I pass it on to my daughter. That's my exit strategy.
Yeah, I don't conceive a scenario where I ever, under any circumstance, convert physical metal back into Federal Reserve notes. Because that's essentially what you're doing. All these people say, oh, you got to sell your gold now. You got to, and what? To exchange it back into dollars? Seriously? No. Trying to speculate on a hypothetical about what might come after this current paradigm, probably useless. I envision really one of two things. I mean, my metal will convert back into whatever the next medium of exchange is, perhaps after we've gone through it all. But then I think, especially here in America, we have to be worried about some kind of draconian tax scheme or something, that if you go to sell your metal and convert it into, some new medium of exchange, that there'll be some, capital gains windfall tax or, something. It may just simply be I hold it and then eventually use it for barter, in a societal breakdown situation. That's what's good thing about silver. You can always barter with it for something, or you use it for barter for bigger goods. I don't know. All I know is I have absolutely no plans to convert my metal back into the current financial system, the paper system.
Yeah, and okay, what I would say is let's focus on the micromanage. We cannot change the macro. So what I do is I stay out of that. I accumulate physical gold and silver and put it on the side. That's how I'm saving. That's my insurance. That's the money for my children's education in the future. And if a collapse is coming sooner, it will pay out. Or maybe if I invest it over the next 5 years or so, I mean, I'm sure that you cannot do anything wrong because they are just going to print, and gold. You cannot. The market will always win. It's impossible that a centralized government or a one world order, whatever, is coming out. So especially, and I think that's the most positive point, is, the internet. Because I consider the internet as the Gutenberg press. And, so far we always had, government propaganda, government radios, government TV stations. When you look at the print medias, the mass media, and how much they decreased over the last few years, they lost 50-60% of their readers. So much more people are trying. They have the knowledge at their fingerprints. They can go and Google, and they can search, and they can do their own research, and they can educate themselves. And I still believe that most of the people, they are just good people. What they want to live in freedom and liberty. They want to pursue their happiness, and they believe in non-force principles. And so I think this combination gives me a lot of hope. Maybe we don't have, a big war, hopefully not. Maybe, I don't know, people will rise in their own consciousness. That's also a possibility. In the past it was much harder. And I think today everything is open. That's why the government is so much afraid when it comes to the internet as an information tool.
One other thing I would add, I completely agree with everybody so far. And like Turd said, I don't have any plans on ever converting back to Federal Reserve notes. And from the question, I mean, it almost sounds like he's asking, what is your game plan? When do I change back to currency? But just this is my own personal perspective, and what I would plan on doing if the situation allows it. I mean, right now the gold-silver ratio is around 70-1 right now. In 2011, it was, I think, as narrow as about 30-1. Right now, what's coming out of the ground, silver is only about 9 times. Coming out of the ground about 9 times more plentiful than gold. So if at the end of this secular bull market, I would expect, as many others do, silver to overshoot. It's more volatile, there's less supply, so percentage move, I would expect silver to do better than gold. I am personal assets more heavily weighted in physical silver than gold. It doesn't mean I don't have any gold, but I'm more heavily weighted towards silver. But if we did see that ratio go down to, say, 5-1, I plan, if I'm able to convert some of that physical silver into gold. If we get down to parity, 1-1, I'm going to plan on converting a lot more silver into gold. So that's one potential thing people can do, that you're not trading back into a paper fiat currency, but you're exchanging for another commodity or currency that might be a bit overvalued or less valued at the time than another one.
Great point, Doc.
Yeah, that's part of my strategy too, Doc, is to convert some of the physical silver that I have into gold. And I personally believe in what Jim Sinclair has he said a few years ago, which is that in the future you will use your gold, you will use your silver. Well, he doesn't really like silver too much, but you will use your gold to purchase property. You will use your gold to purchase a new automobile and to make other purchases for your life. And that's kind of what I see. Will it happen in my lifetime? I don't know. I'm like the rest of you guys. If I don't see it, then I will hand it off to someone who possibly will. And
same thing that applies to the gold-silver ratio applies to other assets as well. I mean, real estate right now is terribly overvalued due to low interest rates. Other than the banks, nobody buys a house right now with cash. If you see interest rates jump to 20 or 30%, you're going to see a big fundamental shift in the valuation of precious metals versus real estate.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, I certainly appreciate all your time today, and we're right at about an hour right now. Well, then we'll just end it here, and I certainly appreciate everybody's time. And once again, you've been listening to dailycoin.org. My name is Rory, and the panel of the Internet Rodeo, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again in the future. Once again, thank you all for listening, and I certainly appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you very much, Rory. Doc, Turd, Andy, it was a pleasure. Take care.
Yes, thanks, everyone.